Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name's Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this magical Friday. If you are tuning in live here on Behance today, definitely let me know who you are and where you're tuning in from. A big hello to Vipin and Cody and Allison and Annie and Jennifer and Vanzua. If I mispronounce anyone's name, I do apologize. Jack is in the house. Colby is in the house. Thanks for tuning in. And to the other several hundred people just joining us, let us know. Let's chat. If you're brand new to Adobe XD, it's a perfect opportunity to ask some questions and pick up on some tips and tricks. And today, Paco says, check out that background with custom lower thirds. I'm trying to mix up the background from time to time. And the lower thirds, let me actually play this one more time. The lower thirds we actually created live on air using Adobe XD, which was super cool. If you missed that masterclass, go back and watch it. It was a fun time. I showed you all how to design and animate a lower thirds in Adobe XD and then export it as a video, and then use it in Wirecast or Premiere or After Effects or whatever you use. It was a lot of fun. That was one of my favorite masterclasses. Hey, Michael, welcome, and Natasha from Canada, and Marcelo, and Laura. Who else do we have? Alberto from Sydney, Australia. I want to go to Australia one day. We've got someone from India. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning in India. What are you all doing awake? Except watching me. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. Las Vegas and Germany, missing those boop animations. The boop is coming back today, but we have to earn the boop, right? We can't just boop for the sake of booping. All right. So what are we going to be doing today? Well, before we dive into the actual, let me hop over here. Boop. That doesn't count. That's just like a fake boop. That's a pre-boop. Before we actually hop over to our project, I did just upload something on Dribbble that a lot of people are starting to talk about. They're wondering what's going on. We're not going to be designing this today, but I want to hear from you if this is something that you might want to see during a masterclass. You know, Vanille says it's 12:30 in the morning. It's pretty late. Go to bed after this, maybe. So, you know, I focus a lot on UI and UX, and I create dashboards and lower thirds and things like that. But, you know, I've been working on this, and it's kind of like a mana or a health bottle that you might see in a video game like Diablo, for example. And I created this all in Adobe XD, aside from the textured border, which I grabbed from Adobe Stock. But all the animation, all that liquid effect, all done in Adobe XD. So is this something that you all would want to see during a masterclass? Because I had a lot of fun doing this. And a long time ago, this is actually a revisit of something I created way back in the day when Auto Animate was first coming to be. And I created this mana bottle. It was okay. It's a little bit jerky, but yeah. Is this something you'd like to see in Adobe XD? So maybe the next masterclass, maybe in 2 weeks, possibly, we'll look at creating something like this. It might take 2 masterclasses, but it was a lot of fun to do. Not very practical, but it was fun, right? All right, so what do you have planned for today? I see a lot of yeses. Cody says, that's awesome. All right, well, maybe we'll do it. Health Globe is much better, yeah. All right, let's hop over to Adobe XD. So last week, we started the process of creating an Animal Crossing inspired companion application. And I know there's a lot of things that I would love to see in an application that links to Animal Crossing. I know Cody is in the chat. We are friends on the Switch. I see she's on Animal Crossing once in a while. I'm addicted to it. My wife is probably playing it right now as I speak. So I started the process of designing what could be in an Animal Crossing companion app. Vipin is saying I look like a young Obi-Wan Kenobi. I haven't shaved. This whole quarantine thing, I'm just lazy. Eventually I'll probably do something with it, but yeah. Minty says not interested. That's okay. That's totally fine. I definitely mix things up a little bit. Some days are UI, some days are UX, and some days are health globes, for example. So you can definitely pick and choose. All right, so today we're going to be expanding on this. We're going to be adding 1 or 2 additional screens. We're also going to be tweaking the design a little bit. You know, I like this design for the most part, but there's one thing that someone pointed out is that, you know, what happens when you have to scroll? What if you have additional tasks going down this list and you want to scroll to see more? The way this is set up right now, at least until we release scrollable groups, which may or may not be in development, I cannot confirm, but until that's done, we don't really have flexibility for scrolling. So if we were to, let's say grab this artboard and drag this down, right? First of all, ignore that. That's part of the what's it called? The component that we built. And then we'd grab this background layer, drag that down. The navigation bar is getting a little bit weird. Things are awkward. So what we're going to do, just to kind of set us up for the additional screens, we may want to alter that navigation bar just a touch. So here's what we're going to do. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to draw out, let's hop over to the layers panel. I'm going to draw out a navigation bar, or at least a rectangle that we're going to use for that navigation bars. And Felipe says the checkboxes are not straight, triggering your OCD. That's actually by design. Animal Crossing they have a lot of things that are not perfectly straight. And I totally get it, Felipe. It definitely kind of triggers me as well, but that's kind of the style of Animal Crossing. So if you're familiar with the franchise and the game, it might make sense. If you're not, it's going to drive you crazy. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, and Vipin is saying, I thought we were designing that liquid animation. Not yet. Maybe in 2 weeks we'll probably do that. But today I want to finish up this Animal Crossing companion app. So I'm going to draw out a navigation bar just like this, make sure it snaps to the corners and the edges. I'm going to bring in the corners just like that, and I'm going to also bring in those edges by holding down Alt or Option. Perfect. Beautiful. Now that that's done, we can essentially use this as a mask. We can basically have two of them, right? And I'm going to tweak the background in a second of this beige-ish shape, whatever you want to call it. So we can use two of these to... Minty says, wait, do I have to watch the last masterclass? You definitely don't have to. We did start this process, the last masterclass, but we're kind of continuing now. Sometimes we take 2 masterclasses to design a few things, but definitely going to be designing brand new artboards in just a few moments. But I do want to make a few tweaks first. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this as a mask. I'm going to name this mask. I'm also going to duplicate it, and I want navigation bars. I'm just going to call it nav. And I want to make sure that the icons, right? The icons and also the pattern are inside of that mask. So I'm going to select both of those and drag them right in between. So essentially you want the mask on top of all the layers that you want inside of it. So with that set up, I'm going to select the mask up here in my layers panel. I'm also going to hold down my shift key and select the last layer. So in this case, the navigation bar. And then under the object menu, we're going to go to mask with shape. And that's going to take all those elements and put them inside of that mask, which is exactly what we want. I'm going to type out navigation. Right? And now I can go ahead and adjust this background just so that things look quite nice. I can snap it down to the bottom. There we go. And if I need to, I can always jump into the navigation bar, grab the mask and the navigation, and just adjust it like that. Perfect. And Salman is asking, can I get this class later on YouTube? Absolutely. So right after this is done, it'll be available on Behance. It'll also be available on YouTube, so you can definitely watch these later. Now, I did have some people afterwards ask me how this background was created. So if anyone who was not tuning into last week's masterclass missed that tip, let's go through that again very quickly. What I'm going to do, just so we can draw out, see it nice and fresh, we're going to draw out a new artboard. I'm just going to click, and I can also make it bigger, I can make it smaller if I want. You also have the presets over to the right-hand side. And just to start simple, I have the background selected of this artboard. I'm going to sample this green that we want to use behind all those fun little shapes, right? And Vipin is saying the Confetti Plug-in, absolutely. So what we're going to do, we're going to start very simple just by drawing out one shape. And we can do that using the polygon tool. And again, I did do this last week, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I do want to show everyone who missed it because I thought it was a super fun trick. And for this particular shape, I'm simply going to sample this color. These are the 3 greens that we're going to be using throughout this application. I can also rotate it if I wanted to. Now, of course, one way of doing a background like this is to duplicate the shape, make some changes, rotate it, maybe change the opacity, change the color. You can sample this one over here, but that's a lot of work, especially if you want, dozens and dozens of these things across your artboard. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to use a plugin. I'm going to hop into my plugins panel right over here, and I do have the Confetti plugin installed. You can also press the plus button at the top to install plugins. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now there's a few things we want to do. One, we want to randomize the colors so that they're not all the same. So what I do have these greens. I'm going to simply copy these. Also, if you have them in your assets panel, you can very easily copy the hex code right there. I'm going to copy this green, and now I have all the different greens selected and inputted into this plugin. Next thing we might want to do is make a lot of them. So in this case, let's try 15 columns. Might be a bit too much, who knows? And then 10. We might want to also randomize the rotation and then randomize the scale. So some are smaller and some are larger. And with that done, I'm simply going to, with my object selected, press run. And look at that. We have a fancy background. Of course, you can undo it and redo it, and it randomizes every single time. You can also jump in there and select individual elements and move them around if you wanted to, but you can create some really fun looking patterns just by using the Confetti plugin in XD. Again, I covered it last week, so I'm not going to cover too much of it today. All right, so we've gone ahead and made some tweaks to our navigation bar, and that's going to kind of set us up. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually use some of that I'm going to just group it and pop it. Whoops. I'm going to group it, copy, and paste it on this artboard right at the back. There we go. Fancy. Beautiful. All right. So those are a few tweaks that we wanted to make, and we now can start creating our next artboard. And I figured, maybe on this one, we've tackled the tasks of this application. Maybe let's see what a profile screen or a home screen can look like, right? So just to make my life easy, I'm going to duplicate this artboard. I still have some confetti kind of floating around here. I'm going to duplicate this artboard over to the right just by selecting it and then Command or Control D. Felipe says fancy Doritos. You know what? It kind of does look like Doritos. And let's just name this home. This might be a profile screen, I'm not quite sure, but we'll see. And now we can start just removing some things that we may not need. Just like that. Now we might want this at the top. We may not, who knows? But maybe for this profile screen, there are a few things we might want on it. We may want a picture of our villager. We may want a name, maybe our title, and I may want some of your help. Those who do play Animal Crossing, what is your current title in the game? Because I may use some of those for this particular screen. Maybe our switch code, and maybe an overview of an island, right? So there's a few things we're going to do. Let me actually start by deleting this. I'm going to use this for our name. So I'll just put this off to the side. I'm going to hop over to Finder, where I do have some assets that I grabbed from the Animal Crossing website. And this one kind of looks like me, so I'm going to use that as a placeholder, at least for now. Drag this in, and that's way too large, so I'm going to make sure to drop it quite a bit. There we go. And maybe I'll put him right about here. That looks pretty good. Now, over here, I might want to start with my name. So I'm going to just type out Pinsky. That is my name in Animal Crossing, so I'm going to run with that. Now, maybe right below it, we're going to use our title. And Cody is saying my Animal Crossing title is Outdoor Loving Mama. I like that. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller because it's definitely secondary information. I can also use, let's say, this secondary green, and then maybe drop the weight as well. Again, to kind of give that hierarchy of our name, definitely primary, title, secondary. So Outdoor Living Mama. That's a little bit too large, so let's go ahead and make sure that it fits. And you know what? Let's just go with Cody Bear. Cody Bear. I'm running with it. And I can replace the villager. Which one looks... This one kind of looks like Cody. Sort of. All right, we're going to drag her in there, make this a little bit smaller. Cody's thinking, why are you doing this? Perfect. All right. So we've got the name, we've got the title. Now down below, we may also want maybe the switch code, for example. So for that, I actually have another icon. Of course, we can very easily create an icon of the switch. But you know what? We have it here. And just very quickly to show you how something like this could be created, let's just do that. I'm going to press R to grab my rectangle. I'm going to draw one out like that. Now, of course, I can round out the corners, but you're noticing all the corners are being rounded out. So what you can do is you can just hold down your Alt or Option key, drag one back, and drag one back again, right? And you can see we have the same shape. And now, it's very easy. You can turn off the fill in this case, set the border to this lovely red. You can increase the size of that border, and everything looks pretty fancy. Of course, then you would add the circle, and you would do the same thing for the Joy-Con on the right. But you know what? We have an icon, so we're going to use it. I'm going to make this nice and small just by dragging this in. That's still a little bit too large. There we go. Now I don't want to put anyone's actual Switch ID, so what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to just SW, just type out a bunch of random numbers, and I believe there are 12 numbers in the Switch ID, and maybe because we want this one to be seen quite nicely, we're going to make it a little bit darker. And you know, in situations like this, there usually is some sort of icon to indicate that you can tap on this particular label and you can copy it, because it may not be apparent initially. So what we can do for that, just to make our lives easier again, is use another plugin. I love plugins. They just make our lives easy. So I'm going to use the Icons for Design plugin. Let's type out copy. And we have a bunch of different icons for copy. Of course, copyright, probably not what we want, but there's this icon right here that we can grab. And we don't want it to stand out too much. So I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Now it is a border-based icon, so I can adjust it in my Properties Inspector right over here to the right, just like that. And maybe I'll just drop the opacity quite a bit. Maybe I'll also sample this green. Gotta make sure to sample it for the border, of course. There we go. And make it a little bit smaller. That way, you know, users who are familiar with this type of functionality, they know that if they tap on this label, they'll be able to very easily copy their Switch code. I believe it says, with Howard, I learned that rectangles can be used to create everything. You're right, Felipe. And in fact, that liquid health bottle I showed you at the beginning, all the liquid was created using rectangles. So you can absolutely do it. You can probably create that entire thing with just rectangles, actually. Now that I'm thinking it through, now you know, I'm very curious. Yeah, this circle you can create with a rectangle, just round out the corners. The liquid is all done with rectangles, and the little sparkles, or whatever they're called in the middle, circles, which you can make with rectangles. Yeah, all of it can be done with rectangles. Maybe that'll be my mission for that masterclass. Do the whole thing with rectangles. All right, so we've got that looking pretty good. Let me make this a little bit smaller. Move all this stuff over. Of course, I should probably start grouping some of these elements. Command and Control G, and this will be switch code. And these will be the title. All right, move this over. Beautiful. Things are looking fancy. Okay, now, of course, there are additional things that we want on this particular artboard. One of which being maybe an island overview. That would be a fun challenge, I agree. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab another title. I'm going to type out Island Overview. That's a little bit too large. I'm going to make it a bit smaller. 38 pixels, looks like it could work, possibly. And we may want, very similar to this screen over here, we may want to keep the aesthetic and consistency. So in this one we had a title, which was task list, and we also have an icon over to the left. So what we're going to do, Vipin says, developers will be cursing you for degrading ellipse. Yeah, I agree. If I was going to be actually designing this for developers, then yeah, I would probably not do everything with rectangles, but you know, might as well have some fun. So we have these icons down here. We have our home icon, right? Which of course we can create as components, which I probably should do at some point. But I'm going to simply paste this in here and make sure I'm using the same colors as the previous artboard, just so that I have consistency. Perfect. Island overview, that looks pretty good. Everything lines up quite nicely. Beautiful. Akin saying, even in 3D, they start modeling with cubes. Exactly, Akin. All right, so we've got island overview, we've got our title looking pretty good. Now, the first thing we may want in an island overview, of course there's many things we may want, is maybe which villagers are on our island. And we can have up to 10 at a time. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab my ellipse. I almost caught myself. I'm gonna grab my ellipse and draw one out. And we essentially want maybe 5 going across and 2 rows down. So let's see what this looks like. We're going to draw one out, something like about that size. We can always experiment. And we want to turn this into a repeat grid. Let me just change the color so we can see what we're dealing with. And up at the top, we've got our repeat grid button all together now. Boop. There we go. There's your boop thippin'. All right. So we're going to drag out 4 more. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, you know what? I probably want, even though I space this out, there's a lot of space in between those. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to just make this a little bit larger. Repeat grid, make sure I have 5. Looks like I do. And space them out. That looks a little bit better. It's a little bit of breathing room, but also not too much breathing room. Now, also inside of this ellipse, we may also want our villagers. So we're going to have 2 things. We're going to have a background, sort of like a colored background behind it, and then we're also going to have the actual villagers. So I'm simply going to duplicate, Command and Control D. So we have villagers, right? And then we have just a background. Background. It helps if I can spell. There we go. So now that we have the shape set that we're going to be using for the villagers, what I can do is I can hop over to Finder, and I do have a folder of villagers, just like this. And I can select all of them. I'm not going to select red. He'll be used for something else, and just drag them directly into Adobe XD. Doesn't matter which ellipse I put them on, and just boop, there we go. It magically fills it in. And I can very easily make some changes, make this a little bit smaller if I wanted to, right? Just like that. And I noticed I did not have drag out my second row, so I can do that. And even though I only had 5 of them initially, XD still stored the additional 5 images that I dragged in. So when I added another row, there were the images. Very smart, isn't it? All right, so we've got these images looking pretty good, but of course the background behind it maybe should reflect the villagers, maybe their mood, or various other things, right? Now, by default, if I were to go into this repeat grid, which I'm going to name villagers, if I were to go into the repeat grid, grab the background layer, and simply change the color, you're going to notice that it changes it everywhere, which we definitely don't want. In many cases, we absolutely do want that, right? But in this particular case, because we want every, I'm trying to get this color just right. Because we want every background to be a little bit different, we need to make a few changes. And in that case, we want to use components, because components will allow you to override those individual elements within that grid. So all you have to do is right click on it and then make component. You can also do that in your assets panel. You can do it over to the right within your properties inspector, under the menu, using a shortcut. There's a million ways to create a component in Adobe XD. And there we go. We now have a component. And of course, this one is the master component. So if you didn't need to make changes across all the components, you can easily do that. But of course, the benefit of this is that we can now dive into any of the other background images and we can, or layers, and just make changes. So I can just change this to, let's say, a bit of a brown color. And maybe this one over here will do blue. And maybe this one might be, you know what, green looks pretty good on that one. This one, is this Judy, I think? Or July? What was her name? What was her name? She was on my island. This was Judy. She visited my island and she wouldn't stay. I was very sad. So this one will be about pink, something like that. And then we might want to go for, maybe we'll go for another pinkish color here. And this one might be maybe a brownish color to kind of match his aesthetic. Raymond is my spirit animal. I still don't have him on my island. One day, I will have Raymond on my island. This will be blue, and then we have one more, which will be, I don't know. Who knows? This color looks pretty good. All right, so now that we have a repeat grid, we have a bunch of villagers, we've overrode the background shapes, and that looks pretty fancy. I'm gonna also adjust the spacing if I wanted to, just like that. Perfect. All right. So now the next thing we might want on this particular home screen is maybe some fun facts about our island or our time playing Animal Crossing, for example. So maybe to kind of break from the aesthetic of this title, maybe because it's a fun facts section, we wanted something different. So maybe we're going to go for like a luggage tag type of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rectangle, of course, draw one out just like this, and I may want some changes because of course tags don't really look like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click, and maybe I'll add a point somewhere right about here. I'll also add a point right about here, right? And I'll bring this in. And of course, I can use your arrow keys to make sure everything is perfect, holding down shift, pressing down, and now we have a pretty good looking tag, right? But of course, we need something to hook onto that tag. So in that case, I'm going to grab my ellipse tool, draw one out just like this, make sure it's somewhere right about here, and then with the ellipse selected, I'm also going to hold down shift and click on the actual tag, and then within my properties inspector right at the top, I'm going to hit the subtract button. That's going to take that top shape and cut it out from that bottom shape. It's going to be a little bit difficult to see. However, if I go ahead and turn off the fill or the border and set the fill to, let's say, a nice blue, you're going to kind of see what's going on, right? So we have that looking pretty good. And maybe I might want a border on this. So I'm going to turn on border. I'm actually going to sample this fill color and then just drop the color. Just make it a little bit darker, just like that. Beautiful. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now, just to kind of let users know what section this is, we may want some text. So I'll just type out fun facts. Maybe I'll set the background or the color to this background color. Make it a little bit smaller. And I might increase the weight, possibly, maybe. I don't know. I'm not loving this. Maybe I'll just make this a little bit darker so it's a little bit easier to see our text. I can also make this a little bit larger. And there we go. We've got our fun facts tag. That looks pretty good. Not bad, not great, but it could work, right? All right, Vipin says, after converting the rectangle into a path, can we round the corners? You cannot. So once you have converted a rectangle into a path, it loses the ability to round out those corners. Maybe one day that'll be fixed or improved, but yeah, it's got to be a rectangle or a polygon to round them out. Cornell is saying, will there be more Masterclass and Daily Challenge vids after pandemic and CC3? Absolutely. We are doing these. We've been doing these for a long time, and I'm going to be doing these until I'm 97 years old. But yeah, absolutely. These daily challenges are not going anywhere. The Masterclasses are not going anywhere. So yeah, stay tuned. A lot of fun stuff coming up. I think that the team has ideas for even more things. So we are doubling down on programming because that's what we do. So I'm going to make sure to group these. Whoops, I just hit Adobe XD. Where did it go? And Annie is saying, is there a way to convert a path back to a rectangle? There is not. So make sure, be careful with those paths and rectangles. It sounds like a bit of a challenge on the engineering side to convert a path back to a rectangle, but yeah, currently there isn't. But maybe one day, who knows? All right, I'm going to make sure to... That looks kind of fun. Just rotate that a little bit. Now in this fun facts section, there may be a few things we might want to add. Maybe, how many bells you've earned total, and how many trees you've chopped, how many branches you've collected, fun things like that. Nothing really useful, but fun things, right? So I'm going to grab my, let's make this happen. I'm going to grab a rectangle. So this will be maybe the first icon. I'm just going to create a few things here. And then down here, we might want some sort of a number. So I'll just put, can't see anything. Let me make sure to darken this. 23.4, whatever it is, 24.5. And this might be million, for example. I'm going to make sure to center this. So we've got our highlight number, and then underneath we may want to explain what some of that is. So duplicating this downwards, total bells, for example, right? Now this one, this is secondary information, so I'm going to drop the size a little bit. Let's go ahead and drop the color a touch to about gray, and maybe even drop the weight just a little bit. There we go. So we've got essentially our icon's going to go here. We've got our number of bells in this case, and then the actual text that explains what this is. So that looks pretty good. And now we may want to have maybe 4 of these fun facts going across our artboard. So just like we did previously with our villagers, we're going to convert it into a repeat grid, just like that. And we're going to drag out 4 additional ones. And I'll just really separate these just in case some of the text layers are a little bit larger. Perfect. All right. Now, as for the icons, I do have a few over here in Finder once again. And I've got my bells icon, and this one I'm going to manually drag in because I want them in a specific order. And of course, I could change the label of the actual file within Finder so that it does go in specific order, but you can also just, grab them, drag them in just like this. And then the final one is rocks, for example, or stones. There we go. Now, what I can do, because we're working with a repeat grid, I can override the image masks just like this, make this a little bit smaller, make this a little bit smaller, and there we go. Perfect. All right. Now, of course, we need to change some of the text layers. So this one might be, let's say 742, for example, trees chopped. And we might want, let's say 920, branches picked up. And then finally 141 stones passed. Maybe, you don't pick up all the stones, right? You pass by some of them. And it's a clever pun. Pass some stones, right? I don't know. I tried. And there we go. So we have this fun facts section. Let me go ahead and make sure to name this fun facts. And I can also group the entire thing and call this fun facts. Perfect. All right. So that's looking pretty good. And we have this lovely home screen. And maybe one more thing we might want to add. I would love this inside of some sort of a companion application, is to know which additional villagers are roaming my island. You've got Flick and you've got Red, parked his boat up there. You've got Leaf and Celeste and all those things. So maybe down here, it might kind of show me those. So what I have here in Finder one more time, I do have, let's say villagers. I do have a lovely image of Red. And maybe he's roaming, right? So I'm going to pop him right about here. And currently, I should probably left justify this. Currently roaming. I'm not sure what Cody's island name is, but I'm going to Andromeda, which is the name of my island. I'm a big space geek. So I'll just put this right about here. I will set the color to this lovely green. And maybe just to kind of match the aesthetic of Animal Crossing, the island name is, I believe, usually pink. Just like this, and I'll make it nice and bold. There we go. Perfect. So, taking a look at this, if we press the play button at the top, we've got this lovely overview of our island, and there's Cody's island name. So we've got the name at the top, we've got the title, the switch code, you'll be able to copy it if you wanted to. And we've got a little bit of an island overview, all the villagers that are on your island, any additional villagers that are not typically living there, roaming around, and then some fun facts. And of course, there's a lot of different things you can add to this. Anthony's saying, I never used Adobe XD before. What is it usually used for? So usually it's used for things like this, designing applications, websites, desktop experiences. But of course, you can use it for advertisements. You can use it to create mana and health bottles, for example, fun animations like that. And just to kind of give you an idea, on this task list that we created last time, what we're able to do is we're able to use components and states to create experiences like this, where you can turn on and off certain checkboxes. You can also press the add button and the close button to bring up that task list. A lot of cool things you can do with Adobe XD. All right, so let's go ahead and tackle one more screen. And by the way, I should probably hop into this navigation bar and just move this bubble over to the home screen, just like that. All right. Now let's go ahead and tackle one more screen, and this one might be our friends list, for example. Ooh, Cody says maybe one day I can draw some assets for Howard. He can use them as one of his XD designs. That would be amazing. If any of you are not familiar with Cody, go check out Cody's work. She is a fantastic illustrator. All right, so on this screen, this is essentially going to be our friends list. So I'm going to just type out friends. I'll go ahead and move this up a little bit. I'm actually going to delete all this stuff because we probably don't need it. And I do want to grab the icon, the friends icon here, just so I can use it up here. All right. Move that into place. That looks pretty good. And I might want to set the color. It looks okay. I'm not digging this blue, but I think for now we will leave it. All right, so now on this one, this particular screen, we may want to list all of our friends that are either online, or maybe also sort by best friends, for example, and then maybe also include maybe what fruit is their native fruit, so whether it's oranges or apples or whatever it might be. So what I'm going to do is we're going to use repeat grids again. I feel like this is like a repeat grids masterclass. So I'm going to draw one out just like this. This is going to be the actual image of our friend. And maybe I'll round out the corners just a little bit, just like that, right? And then over to the right, I'm going to actually just start grabbing some of these text layers just so I can reuse them. This might be the actual name of the friend. So I'm going to write friend. And then maybe below, we may want the island. And this will be secondary information for the most part, so I'm going to drop it a little bit. And maybe also sample that green up here. And maybe over to the left over here, maybe this is where we can put the native fruit. So I'm going to use my rectangle one more time, draw one out like that, right? Give it a little bit of breathing room. We do have some room. That looks okay. Now, thinking forward a little bit, because these text layers will be included in a repeat grid, if I were to simply go ahead and grab these, put them in a repeat grid, it essentially will crop off right at the last text layer. So to fix that and to give myself a little bit of breathing room for friends who might have longer names or longer islands, what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to actually convert the text layer from area text to point text. Sorry, that's wrong. From point text to area text. Got it backwards. I'm going to press on that, and then I want to make sure to actually drag these out to give myself a little bit of breathing room when I do turn it into a repeat grid. Perfect. I'm also going to name this layer fruit. And I probably don't need the borders on both of these. So there we go. All right, so we have these looking pretty good. Make sure everything lines up really nicely. And now, just like we've done a million times before, I'm going to select all these elements and turn them into a repeat grid. Boop. And I'm going to drag them downwards. And I can have a few extending down off the artboard. And of course, my navigation bar needs to be moved above this, so we'll just, in my layers panel, I can just move this up, just like that. Perfect. And I'll spread this out a little bit. Now I may also want, right up here, some room so we can toggle between our online friends, our best friends, or whoever it might be, right? So I'll just leave a little bit of room, and we're going to fill out this repeat grid in a second using another plugin. But let's go ahead and create this section up here. And Anthony is saying, how do you magnify the palettes like you did on the right side? Oh, so that's a feature of Mac OS. It's in the accessibility section, and I'm able to hold down my control key on my keyboard and just zoom in and out with my scroll wheel, which is super cool. All right, now I'm going to grab my rectangle again. Let's draw out a toggle across the screen. I'll round out the corners quite a bit. And maybe I'll set for this, the inactive state, it's going to be a nice gray color, just like that. Now on this one, there's going to be actually two labels. I want to make sure I have a nice amount of breathing room. There's going to be two labels. One is going to be online. I'll set the color to white. And one is going to be best friends, just like that. And I'll worry about the spacing in a moment, but maybe to indicate which is the active state, I can go ahead and select this gray box. I'm going to duplicate it, Command and Control D, just like that. And I'll just move this in. I'll make sure to sample this green color. That way we know exactly which section we are on. In this case, the online section. And of course, once we do get to creating components and states, we can move this guy over just like this. And we can even make this a little bit larger if we needed to, right? Beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and group this. I don't need the background selected. I'm going to group it and call this toggle. Bam. All right. So we've got our online. I'm going to give it a little bit more breathing room. There we go. So we've got our online friends, and then we'll get to best friends in a second. But the big question is, how do we populate this repeat grid? Let me actually give this a little bit more breathing room, just like that. Beautiful. And there's a few ways. Of course, we could go ahead into Finder, just like we did before. And I've got, let's say, our players, and I can just start dragging things in to these boxes, which we're going to get to in a second. But one thing you could also do is use a plugin to help you populate the grid. Let's say, for example, you are working with a spreadsheet where you're kind of pulling in all the data from Animal Crossing. You're filling out all your friends, all their islands, all their native fruits, and maybe even one day Animal Crossing might have an API, for example. So if I hop over to Safari, I've got this spreadsheet here that I've been working on for this example, and I simply have, the name of the villager, the island, and then their native fruit. And I just have a URL of a bunch of fruits. I have oranges and apples in this case. It's the only ones I can find. So what we can do, we can use this spreadsheet or any other Google Sheet or CSV file to automatically load in this data. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL. Oops. I'm going to copy the URL. I'm going to hop back over to Adobe XD. I'm going to hop into my plugins again, which is right down here at the bottom. Head back. And we're going to be using the Google Sheets plugin. And if you don't have the Google Sheets plugin, hit the plus button at the top, head over here, and then type out Google, and you'll be able to install it right here. Now, when you click on the Google Sheets plugin, you'll be given the option to paste in a public link right over here. I'm going to go ahead and paste it. And now we can start mapping the layers that we created in Adobe XD with the actual column names. Now, in this case, I named it a little bit different. So friend, for example, which is the element in XD, I did not name it what it was in the Google Sheet. So in this case, I can just go very quickly, go in and name it, or just map it to name. It did notice that fruit and fruit were the same, and island were the same as well. And I can simply press apply. And it's going to grab all that information and immediately pop it directly in. And now, of course, if I needed to, I can very quickly dive in here, make some changes, make sure everything looks pretty good, makes it a little bit smaller. And because I'm working with a repeat grid, everything stays in sync, which is great. There we go. Perfect. That looks pretty good. Now, of course, I can, also grab some of these players. Maybe, let's say this one looks like me. I'll just pop that in there, make some changes like that. And we'll grab this one, put that there. There we go. And I'll go through and make some changes in a second. And pop that in there. There we go. All right, let me go through and make some changes to this, just to the masking of these images, make this a little bit smaller. Oops. Double click. Perfect. And the nice thing about the Google Sheets plugin, that doesn't look too bad. I'll move it over a little bit. And this one I'll move down a touch. There we go. And perfect. All right. The nice thing about the Google Sheets plugin is it allows you to, oh, there you go. Michael just mentioned it. If you make an update to the Google Sheet, does it update in XD? So it does. So what you're able to do is I can hop over here, and you have to make sure that everything is labeled correctly. So I'm going to make sure to name this name, I think it was, that I have in the Google Sheet. Yep, name, and this was island, right? And fruit is fruit, so that's good. So if I did go ahead and decide, maybe instead of Kate, we're going to use Cody again, right? So in here, so I'm just going to put Cody Bear. I don't remember the exact, it was Bear something or other. I think it was this, possibly. So if I did go ahead and make that change, I can hop over to Adobe XD one more time, into my plugins panel, and then refresh content, and it's going to grab that content and automatically update it, which is super cool. So again, in a world where you might be working with people who specifically handle spreadsheets, I know I hate working with that, but some people love it. And some people, they have these massive spreadsheets that they want you to include inside of your designs. It previously wasn't very easy, but now you can very easily do that. And if they do decide to make some changes to it, you can very easily update it. Let me just make some changes to this. It looks a bit strange. There we go. All right. Fancy. Yeah, I agree, Michael. Nice. All right. So we have our online friends looking pretty good. The big question is, how do we actually toggle back and forth between online and best friends? Now, of course, there might be some crossover, and we're probably not going to switch up the villagers a little bit, but one thing I do want to do is actually move this over. Perfect. And I was hoping to get to the actual chat experience, but we may not have time for that today, but we'll get to that. Probably not in this particular example, but we'll talk more about that at some point. I am running the daily creative challenges starting next week, and there might be a chat experience in that. Just a little bit of a hint. So stay tuned for that. All right. So how do we toggle back and forth between our online friends and our best friends, for example? Here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to create 2 repeat grids. So I'm going to do another one over here, and I can use the same Google Sheets plugin. Maybe for this one, I will actually randomize it a little bit. Just like that. Let's see if it updated. It did not update. That's fine. We'll just leave it at this. I'm going to move this one to the side. You're going to notice it automatically kind of moves onto the pasteboard. And that's by design. When you take something from an artboard and move it off of the artboard, it goes onto the pasteboard. So what you're able to do is either group them or put them into components. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to select the repeat grid. We're going to select the toggle. We go into the layers panel so you can see what I'm working with. And I should probably name this friends. So we have our toggle selected. We also have our friends repeat grid selected, and we're going to turn all of these into a single component. So I'm going to go over here to the right, press the plus button to create our default state. Now, I also want another repeat grid, right? And this essentially, if you use your imagination, this will be for your best friends. It's going to look the same because we probably don't have time to completely redo it, but this is going to be your best friends. And I'm going to leave this over here to the right. And now when I move it over, because it's contained within a component, or you can also do the same thing with a group, you can move things off of it as long as there's something else on the artboard inside of that component or group. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to name this, let's say, best friends. And I also want to make sure to move my navigation bar on top. Beautiful. All right. So we have our online state looking pretty good. And now we need to design the second state, which is our best friend state. So over here, again, within the properties inspector, I'm going to press the plus button and create a new state, which I'm going to name best friends, just like that. And now that it's been created and selected, we can start making changes. So I'll start simple. I'll grab the green toggle at the top. I'll shift it over to this side and make sure we have some nice padding, just like that. And then I'm going to grab both these repeat grids and shift them over. And again, use your imagination. Imagine that this repeat grid looks a little bit different. Maybe it has different information. Maybe it has a button to, that could be fun. A button to message, for example. And because this is a repeat grid, we can actually go ahead and let's find a button, or let's find some sort of an icon to message. Why did you put it up there? There we go. I'll just put this over here. That looks pretty good. Not loving the color, so I'll sample another color. Make that a little bit, responsive resize is on. I'll turn that off. Make that a little bit smaller. And now we have an option to message our users, right? There we go. Now, of course, we may have some problems, right? Because in our default state, that message icon was not there. And in our best friend state, it is there. Now, it probably will work because it starts off the artboard, but if you want to make sure that you don't run into any problems, what you're able to do is, what I would suggest you do actually, I'm going to copy this, I'm going to actually delete it, and I'm going to hop into the default state, into this second repeat grid. I'm going to paste that message icon right about here. And now because I edited the default state in the master component, it's also appearing in our, I moved this over. It's also appearing in the secondary state as well, right? So I can just grab this, move this over, and there we go. Beautiful. All right, Felipe says Elon's island is Mars and it has apples, indeed. All right, so we have our two states created, right? We have our default state, which is our online friends, and we have also our best friends state. And again, this repeat grid looks a bit the same, but we can always make changes later. So how do we wire this up? What we're going to do, we're going to hop into prototype mode right here at the top, and we're going to select the best friends label, which is what we want a user to tap on to activate the second state. We're going to click on the handle over to the right, and then we're going to choose auto animate for the type, and that'll allow XD to animate between those two states. We're going to choose that state, the best friend state. And in terms of the easing options, ease in and out, I always go to that one. It's very simple and it looks pretty good. And I'll go for a duration of about 0.6 seconds. And now we can go to our second state, our best friend state, select the online label, and do the exact same thing. I'm just going to select the default state. All the other properties are maintained. Perfect. All right, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and press the play button at the top. Let me move this out of the way so we can see it. We've got our friends list. And of course, I could set up scrolling. I'll maybe do that in a second. And we can tap on best friends. It switches over. I'm noticing the padding is a little bit different. I will fix that. And we can press on online and we just cycle back and forth, right? Let me go ahead and make some changes because that's going to bother me. Select this, make sure the padding looks about the same. Of course, I can use content aware layout to do that as well. Perfect. It's still not, it's close enough, right? There we go. So 1 pixel off. It's close enough. Now I may also want to set up scrolling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the navigation bar is fixed to my artboard. I'm going to show you why that's so important. If I select the entire artboard and I scroll down or drag down a little bit to add a little bit more space, if I launch the preview and I scroll, right, the navigation bar is also going to scroll with it, which we definitely don't want. So with the navigation bar selected, I'm simply going to press fixed position when scrolling over to the right. And now I can scroll down and see additional entries, right? And of course I have one extra one down there. So you see Pinsky twice, but there we go, right? And of course I can grab that background layer, make it longer, just so that I have the same nice and consistent. There we go. I can scroll up and down and do my thing, right? Toggle back and forth, online, and best friends. And of course, only the best friends repeat grid has that message icon, which will launch us into a whole new experience. Tom is asking, can you ever copy a set of states and serve them from one master set to create a new master? So not directly. I know the team is looking into that. They're looking to a lot of different improvements for components. But what you could do, some people have found an interesting workaround, is basically create a design system. So if I wanted to basically take this toggle and create a new master component with the same same states, what you can do is you can copy this. If I'm remembering this correctly, create a new document, doesn't matter what it is, paste it. So this is essentially pasting it as a linked asset. Then you can go into your assets panel. You can make it a local component, right? Then you can do the same thing backwards. So you can copy it here, or at least find the master component, right? You can copy it here, go back to your other document, paste it, and then that file wasn't saved, so there's a linking issue. But you can essentially do that. It's a little bit of a workaround right now, but the team is absolutely looking into how that could be done in the future, and a lot of different component improvements. Courtney is asking, can we save components with states in CC libraries? I believe that's in development. I believe the team is working on CC library integration with components. So stay tuned for that. Don't know exactly when that's coming, but I know that's been in the works, I believe. All right, so we have about a minute left or so. Let's very quickly go over what we've done over the last 2 weeks. This will be probably the last Animal Crossing themed masterclass. The next one, which will be in 2 weeks, will be something completely different, probably that animated health globe thing. All right, so we started off last week with our task list, and we built out, I know Felipe was mentioning the weird checkbox angle, which I know it's a little bit strange, but we started off creating this, and we used repeat grids. We also created all these lovely icons at the bottom. We custom created them using Adobe XD, also the background, and then we added some interaction. So if you tap on the checkbox, it has this cute little animation, just like that, and you can press on the plus button, it slides the new task up. You can press on it again, it slides it down. Bruno's asking, is the team looking into scrolling as trigger for component states? I believe they are. Just because they're looking into it doesn't mean it's going to come next month. They're looking to a lot of different things. And of course, priorities come into play, right? This year is going to be a lot about collaboration and a few other things because of COVID and everything else is going on. But the team is looking to a lot of different things. So yeah, who knows when it's coming, but I hope it's coming. And then today we moved on to this home screen with, I should probably name this one over here, it's bothering me, friends, capitals, whatever, with an overview of an island, and then fun facts at the bottom. No masterclass next Friday. No masterclass. I don't believe there'll be any masterclasses next Friday. We do have that day off. There will be a daily challenge, but no masterclasses. And then we built out a friends list with a toggleable interaction to toggle between online and best friends. So that is just about going to do it. In just a few minutes, we've got Andrew coming up with Nick, and then Andrea Hawk coming up with the Daily Creative Challenge. So stick around for that. I'm going to be back next week on Monday hosting those Daily Creative Challenges. And then, over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be designing some pretty cool stuff. So big thanks to everyone joining me live on Behance. And usually the masterclass is every single week. But next Friday, we do have off, so we're missing one. But I will be back the week after. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.